Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Professor Therapy here today talking about how to tune your violin. So first off the bat, I just wanted to mention that your violin is going to go out of tune pretty much between each time you're practicing, and also it's possible that your violin is going to go out of tune during a practice session, especially if you are doing some serious practicing, meaning, maybe more than, say, like an hour a day. It's quite possible that your violin is going to go out of tune, and it's also possible that even though it was probably tuned up in the shop when you bought it, that it's probably going to have gone somewhat out of tune by the time you've gotten home. Violins are sensitive to temperature and humidity. Just as an aside, it's also very important that you do keep your violin humidified, especially in the dry weather, such as the winter, which you can do by getting an actual humidifier, or you can also simply just get just a regular clean kitchen sponge, soak it in some water, and then squeeze it out and keep that sponge in your case and just redo that process probably about once a week or so to make sure that your violin stays in good shape and doesn't develop any cracks. Also, it's important to note that the strings are in fact under quite a bit of tension. Notice that this here, your tailpiece, is connected to the bottom, but if you take a look at that, it's actually just connected by this knob, so it actually does have some freedom of rotation. Now, it's not a good idea to press it too much, but you can see that that in fact is held in place by tension, and if you do loosen the tension of all your strings to change your strings, then that will actually fall. We notice that we have the strings under tension, and because of that, okay, and the tension, by the way, is also adjusted by these pegs. And so the tension of the strings is what is going to, in fact, actually give them their pitch. So when we're tuning the violin, in fact, what we're doing is we're adjusting the tension of the strings to give the desired pitch, which is going to be measured in hertz by our tuner metronome to tell us whether or not it is in tune. So keeping all of these things in mind, we can see that most likely what's going to happen to your violin is that it's going to go flat. Once you've gotten it tuned, say at the shop, or you've gotten your violin tuned yourself, it is likely that the tension on the strings is going to cause this to loosen. That's what it will tend to do, for the strings to loosen. They're not going to spontaneously get more tight. They're almost certainly going to become more loose in time because of just the time has gone by, small vibrations, changes in temperature, weather, humidity, and so on. So if you're going to be a violinist, one of the things you're going to have to learn how to do is how to tune this up, and it is something that you will be doing at least on a daily basis every time you are practicing. So let's get started with how we can do that. Now, I have a video on introducing this tuner. There are many kinds of tuners, and you may have another one. And many of the principles should probably apply to many other similar tuners. But hopefully you will find this useful for getting started. So the first thing we want to do is turn the tuner on by pressing the on-off button, and we do need to just hold that down for a few seconds to get that to come on. And we want to make sure that we are in the tuner mode. So mine is come up in the tuner mode, which is showing this little arrow going back and forth, and it's also displaying which note it's hearing from me talking. And that's how we recognize that there are other modes, and if you happen to be in the wrong mode, you can arrive at the correct mode by simply just pressing this button. There we are in metronome mode, and this is in the pitch generation mode known as sound. So just make sure you are in the correct mode. We also want to have this set to 440 hertz for the standard tuning, and we also want to have this in the key of C for our tuning. Now, we also note that there is the little kickstand on the back, so you may want to just flip your kickstand out and put your tuner down on a convenient nearby place as you are working on your tuning. All right, so with that in mind, what we're going to do is we're going to test out our violin to see if it is in tune or not. And I know that this is not in tune. In this mode, what we're going to do is we're going to be watching to see what note the tuner is hearing. It is going to report the note in this position right here. And we also need to know which notes are supposed to be on the string. So here on the violin, we have the E string, the A string, the D string, and the G string. So what we're going to do now is we are going to pluck the string and see what note this thinks it is. So we're usually going to start off by tuning the A. When you are in an orchestra, you will hear the A440, which we can reproduce by going to the sound mode, and we can adjust this to the A note, which I'm doing by using the note button. And I'm just going to go to A and having 440 here. So just like that, this is going to generate, it's known as the concert A. And that's what this should sound like. And you can hear that they are not the same, so we are not in tune. So now going back to our tuning mode, like this, we can check to see what this thinks the note, what the note is in actuality. And we see that we are getting a G sharp. Now, thinking about our musical scale, G sharp is below an A by half the tone. So that means that this is flat. So it is sharp. It is a sharp G sharp. And we need A. So now this means that we need to adjust the note. So there's two ways that we can adjust the violin. We can use the pegs for tuning. So notice that the way that the strings are rolled onto the pegs, the string in fact rolls from the front side to the back. When this is so it's actually threaded through the peg, and the peg is rolled in this orientation to put your strings on. This will be your E string, this will be your A string, this will be your D string, and this will be your G string. So it's important to make sure that you turn the correct peg for the string that you're trying to tune. Otherwise, you may over tighten something and you can pop the strings. Just as a word to note, I have in fact actually popped strings and had them pop out and actually hit me in the face. So I know that some people will tune their violin like this, which I do not recommend, because it's possible you can pop your string and it can hit you, which is a little bit dangerous. So I recommend holding your violin and just making sure that it's not that close to your face, just in case there's an accident. Sometimes the strings will break, especially if they're old or worn, or if you are inexperienced with tuning. I've also seen that there are problems with cheaper bridges, and the bridge can cut the string and cause it to pop. So I have also seen instances of that happening, where multiple strings pop. If that happens, you should really have your violin serviced, and you probably should replace your bridge. But anyways, with some of these things in mind, then we are thinking about, should we use the pegs to tune, or should we use the fine tuners down at the bottom? And so what we can use to judge that is the idea of how far off are we really from the desired note. So since we're at G sharp and we're looking to get to A, we're only about a half step, and it even said that the G sharp was on the sharp end, so we're almost at A. So I'm thinking that we do not need to make major changes. Major changes would be tuning with the pegs. Finer tuning would be done with the fine tuners. So turning the pegs away from you in this orientation is going to make the note sharper. And these fine tuners are going to work just like standard screws. Rotating in this orientation to the right is going to make them go in, which will increase the tension. It's a lever system down underneath here, which is going to actually cause the little arm to push back, which increases the length, which will make your string more tense, which will increase the pitch of the string, so it will make it sharper. You can decide which of these two we should use. So we're only a half a step off, and we are a little bit flat. And as we mentioned, that's almost certainly going to be the case. You're almost certainly going to be flat because your strings are not spontaneously going to get tighter. They're much more likely to spontaneously get looser. So what we're going to do then is we're going to use the fine tuner for the A string, which we find simply by just looking to see which one it plugs into. And then we are going to twist it to the right to make it tighter. And we will follow along as we're plucking, and we will watch our tuner to see when we have gotten this in tune. So let's see if I can get all these things in view. Okay, bring it up. Not high enough yet. Are we there yet? You're at G sharp still. Okay, now we're at A, but we are flat. So we're getting closer because A flat. So G sharp will then go to A flat, and then we will be tuning this up, and we are watching the arrow and seeing we're getting closer and closer. And voila, there we are. We are now in tune on the A string. Now, it may go out of tune because, again, think of this. As we are adjusting the tension for the 3 other strings that we need to tune, they're going to be affecting the tension in this tailpiece. And so changing the tension on any one of these is going to affect the tension of all of them. Mostly it will affect the tension of the one that we're tuning, but it can have the effect that it will affect the other ones. And so what we want to do is we will first tune all of them independently, and then we will go back and we will recheck them and tune them a second time in the second iterative round, just to make sure that everything is still in tune. All right, so the next string that I like to tune is the D string. Now you can in fact actually play the D pitch on this by going to the mode of the tone generation and switching this from A now to D. So D without a sharp, and that is the pitch that this string should be playing, and we notice that that does not sound right. So we're going to switch back to our pitch mode. Again, you are not going to change the 440 because that's the calibration point of this scale. And so we're going to stay at 440 in the key of C, as seen here. And now we are going to tune the D string. So let's pluck the D string and see what we've got. All right, so we've got a C sharp. All right, so again, we're not that far off. So I will elect to use the fine tuner in order to tune this up. Okay, we've now made it all the way to C sharp. Now we're in the lower range of D, being oh, almost. Maybe a little too much. Now, as you see, you can get a little bit of fluctuation because it is going to be affected a little bit by the timbre of your particular instrument and so on. But anyways, we want to make sure we're generally in range and we're getting the green light. So that looks pretty good. Let's go back and test our A. Notice that it got a little sharp. All right, good. Now we're going to test the E string. Now, because this string is the one of the 4 that does not have wrapping on it typically. So notice that these others, if you look really carefully, actually have something wrapped around the core. The E string typically does not have anything wrapped around it. So it is the thinnest of the strings. So this one is the most likely to break, and it is somewhat more fragile than the other strings. So I have definitely broken more E strings than any other string, and that will likely be the case for you as well. So we do just want to be careful as we are tuning it. And like I mentioned, it is possible for strings to pop. This is definitely the one that is most likely to pop. So you want to make sure, again, that you just keep it away from you as you're tuning. Now, I'm not going to actually generate the tone for this because the tone is not in the range of this scale. We can get an E, but it will be an octave below. So I'm going to just go ahead and just pluck the E string, which should be, so we have the A string, B, C, D, E, right? So that's four steps above. And we're going to check and see where we're at. So we're at D sharp, not bad. This one does tend to go out of tune a lot because it does tend to be under a lot of tension. Still at D sharp. Up we go. E flat. And when I'm tuning with the fine tuner, I'm doing just between about 1/4 and 1/2 a turn each time I'm adjusting it. We don't really want to over adjust. I'd rather be conservative and tune multiple times than over adjust and break a string. All right, looks pretty good. Now, let's take a look at the G string. All right, actually the G string is not too bad, but I haven't demonstrated doing the tuning with the pegs. So I'm going to go ahead and just loosen this peg to some arbitrary amount so that we can demonstrate what will need to be done. So let's see what we are at now. Okay, so we are in the E range, E, F, G. So we're 2 notes away. So that means this is pretty out of tune, and we really probably aren't going to be able to fix that with the fine tuner, which more has a range within, say, like ±1 note at best. So we are going to need to tune with the peg. When I decide that I need to tune with the peg, one of the things that I do like to do is I go to the fine tuners and I go ahead and loosen it. So imagine that if my fine tuner had been screwed all the way in and I adjusted it with the peg and I was still a little bit flat and I wanted to adjust it up, I wouldn't have any adjustment room left in the peg. And almost always you're going to need to adjust up to make it sharper rather than adjust down, although that can be not true when you're adjusting with the peg, where you probably don't want to over adjust. So what I like to do is I like to just loosen this screw. Don't take it out. You don't want to loosen it too much, but I'm just going to open that up so that I'm going to have a generous amount now of tuning space to make it sharper using this peg, using the fine tuner. And I would do that anytime any particular string goes out of tune to the extent where I decide I need to use the peg. The other situation when I would decide to use the peg to tune is, say, for example, the E, which you can see I have screwed this in the farthest. And so what's going to happen is in a couple of days, if I need to keep sharpening it, I'm going to run out of space to screw that down to make it sharper, because if I've adjusted it with the fine tuner multiple times, eventually it's going to be at its maximum tension using the fine tuner. And so then I would also be forced to tune with the pegs, in which case I would loosen the fine tuner and then I would start tuning with the pegs to get it approximately right, and then I would bring it up into its final pitch using the fine tuner. Right. So back to this, we have our G string, which is now measuring as a D sharp. Also, it's gotten even worse, so we need to bring that up to G. So now that we have this loosened down at the bottom, I'm going to turn this very gently up at the top. I'm just holding my violin in the front, and I am just going to turn the peg a little bit. It kind of will stick and turn in increments. And so it is wood on wood. If you are having problems turning your pegs, there's a couple of things you can do about that. If the peg is too loose, which we can notice because it may be sliding out of tune, like you twist it and then it can completely just spin out so that there's no tension at all. So if that happens, you can do a couple of things. You can push the peg in further, which is going to make it so that the diameter of the peg itself is going to be thicker. So if you actually pull these out, you can, and even just looking at this, you can see that it's actually tapered a tiny bit so that as you push it in, it's going to have a thicker diameter so it would hold better. So you can try that. The other thing you can do is if it's sticking too much is you can actually take a little chip of your rosin and you can just rub it in or put it in the hole, which will just give it a little bit more grip. If you find that your pegs are too, if you find that your peg is too loose because it's spinning wildly, you can also, if it's stuck and you can't turn it. So if it's too loose, you need to put rosin in it. If it's too stuck and you cannot turn your peg, you can try pulling it out a little bit, but sometimes there's just too much friction between them. And so you can actually buy special peg lubricants, which you can use to put on your pegs. I don't actually have any on hand, but that is a product that you can buy for your violin if you find that's the case. All right, so now I have turned the peg a little bit. So basically, once you hear that peg click once, now we're going to pluck again and see. Oh, we're still way off. And that actually looks like it may have gotten a little loose because I can feel that tension is pretty loose. The tension on your G string oftentimes is going to feel really light. What are we doing now? Oh. All right, we're into the G range. We've almost gotten it spot on. I'm going to just adjust it with the fine tuner now since we are in the correct range. It appears that I am a little bit flat. And there we have it. Now we are in tune with the G string. All right, so now we have tuned each of these strings by itself. And so what we want to do is, as I mentioned, go back and check them all again and do some fine tuning if needed. Reason being that by changing the tension of one string, in effect, we can do some amount of changing of the tension in all of the strings because of the way that they're coupled together on the tailpiece. So let's go back and test again. E string, flat. So it's interesting. It actually has gone a little bit flat and I've just adjusted it again. You are going to get some change in pitch. You might expect that it would go sharp, but also just it's adjusting and the tension has been increased by tuning it so it can slip a little bit. That is the same thing that you may notice during your practice session. So let's see if we're on target now. Oh, a little too much. E, A. Pretty good. D. Oh, that one's gone flat. And finally G. Maybe a teeny bit sharp. All right, one final time. Obviously, one could go into the nth degree and making sure that all of these are absolutely perfect. We do see that there is a bit of fluctuation as we are fine tuning these, but we can see that the percent error, which we can tell from the little arrow, is very small. So, and there's also going to be a little bit of fluctuation when you pluck that string for the final time. So for all intents and purposes, we can tune that up to a reasonable level of being in tune. And there we have it. We have now tuned the violin using plucking. One may also tune the violin using the bowing, which some may find to be a bit more accurate. You may be at the stage where you're learning to tune your violin for the first time and are not comfortable using your bow yet. And so I just wanted to show you how you can tune this up using your tuner. So hopefully this video is helpful for those of you who are learning how to tune your violin for the first time and are learning how to use this tuner. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.